Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping on our virtual boots, grabbing our digital trowels, and digging into a subject that spans the entire breadth of human existence: archaeology.
Yeah,
This
archaeology.
deep dive isn't just about, recovering dusty artifacts. It is the crucial, complex recovery and intricate analysis of material culture that defines us.
Right.
It is fundamentally the rigorous, evidence-based study of human activity.
And for you, the listener, understanding archaeology means understanding a discipline that sits at one of the most exciting intersections in academia, that of the social sciences and the humanities.
Okay.
It is a field that relies heavily on rigorous, hands-on, and now increasingly technological methods, from large-scale regional surveying and meticulous site excavation to the subsequent deep scientific analysis of every piece of collected data.
All specifically to learn about the human past.
Exactly, all focused on the past.
When you talked about the human past, that time frame is what truly sets this discipline apart. It's not just a few thousand years of recorded history that we're dealing with.
Oh, not at all. It covers the vast majority of our history, and the timeline is almost, well, it's hard to grasp.
How far back are we talking?
Archaeology stretches all the way back to the earliest known evidence of hominin activity, specifically the development of the very first documented stone tools at the Lemekwi 3 site in East Africa. That's roughly 3.3 million years ago.
3.3 million years, wow.
Yeah. And the study continues right up until recent decades, looking at the detritus of 20th and 21st century civilization.
So it's the material culture focus.
Right. The artifacts, architecture, and biofacts that comprise the archaeological record. That's the only way to access that deep, unwritten past.
Okay, let's unpack this history. Our mission today is to give you a complete picture. We are going to trace how this field evolved from what was essentially high-end artifact hunting,
Antiquarianism.
which we know as antiquarianism,
Yeah.
into the rigorous, highly technical, and data-driven science it is today.
And we'll also be exploring the cutting-edge methods revolutionizing the field think remote sensing and artificial intelligence.
Definitely want to get into that.
And we absolutely must dedicate significant time to the major ethical, political, and cultural controversies that archaeologists are navigating right now. It's unavoidable.
Okay, sounds like a packed agenda. Let's start at the beginning, or, well, maybe not the very beginning, but an early documented case.
Right.
To begin the history of archaeology, we have to travel far beyond the Romantic period. Forget Indiana Jones for a second.
Definitely forget Indy for this bit.
We need to start with King Nabonidus, the last king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, around 550 BC in ancient Mesopotamia.
Nabonidus, what's truly remarkable about him is that he wasn't just, stumbling upon things. He was intellectually driven. He was actively searching for knowledge about a past that was already ancient to him.
Yeah.
He set the precedent for intellectual inquiry into the distant past. He is often recognized as the first archaeologist because he specifically commissioned and led excavations to find the foundation deposits of temples.
Temples to who?
To important deities like Amma, the sun god, and Anunitu, the warrior goddess, in places like Sippar and a sanctuary in Haran.
So he was seeking religious continuity, but he did something profoundly scientific in the process. You mentioned dating.
Precisely. He attempted to place his find in a chronological order. When he successfully located a foundation deposit belonging to Naram-Sin of Akkad, a ruler from the long-lost Akkadian Empire, who reigned around 2200 BC, Nabonidus attempted to calculate its exact age.
How close did he get?
While his estimate was significantly off, perhaps by as much as 1500 years,
Oof.
due to limited information back then. However, the sheer conceptual leap, the attempt to establish a chronology based on the physical evidence and the historical record, rather than relying solely on myth or folklore, that was a profoundly significant step towards what we now call scientific dating.
Right, the attempt itself was the key innovation.
Exactly.
That brings us forward many centuries to Europe, where the modern science of archaeology really grew out of the much older, multidisciplinary pursuit known as antiquarianism.
Antiquarianism, yeah. Prior to the 19th century, this was centered on studying history with a particular focus on ancient artifacts, manuscripts, monuments, and sites. They were compilers, recorders, collectors.
Kind of like intellectual magpies?
Sort of. Their guiding philosophy was famously summarized by the 18th century antiquary Richard Colt Hoare's motto: "We speak from facts, not theory."
Facts, not theory. Okay.
They were empirically focused, prioritizing the object itself, even if their methods of recovery and dating lacked the rigor we expect today.
And the early figures here were true restless travelers, documenting sites before they were destroyed or looted. Tell us more about Cyriacus of Ancona from 15th century Italy.
Ah, Cyriacus, often called Pater Antiquitatis, or Father of Antiquity. He was tireless. He traveled extensively throughout Greece and the eastern Mediterranean, meticulously recording detailed findings on sites that were then largely unknown to the wider European Renaissance world.
Like where?
He made vital drawings and notes on the Parthenon, Delphi, and the Egyptian pyramids and hieroglyphics. This documentation proved invaluable later, particularly for sites like the Parthenon, which suffered significant damage after his visit.
So his notes became the primary source.
In some cases, absolutely.
And while European antiquarians focus on the Mediterranean, we can't overlook the systematization of historical study happening simultaneously in other parts of the world.
No, it's crucial not to adopt a Eurocentric view of archaeological history. Consider the 12th century Indian scholar Kalhana. His research was incredibly broad, involving the recording of local traditions, manuscripts, coins, architectural features.
Wow.
This culminated in Rajatarangini around 1150, which is recognized by many scholars as one of the first history books of India, a comprehensive attempt to synthesize various sources into a cohesive, recorded narrative.
And the Chinese tradition of epigraphy sounds very similar to the methodical investigation of artifacts.
It was highly sophisticated. During the Song dynasty in Imperial China, 960, 1279, figures like Wu Yangshu and Zhao Mengcheng established Chinese epigraphy. This centered on investigating, transcribing, and analyzing ancient Chinese bronze inscriptions from the Shang and Zhou periods.
So reading the inscriptions on bronzes.
Exactly. They weren't just collecting beautiful bronzes, they were using the inscriptions to construct social history. What's remarkable is the level of critical thinking present even then. The scholar Shen Ku, for example, criticized his contemporaries for misattributing vessels and trying to revive them for ritual use without understanding the vessel's original functional context.
Huh. That's a direct critique of antiquarianism before the word even existed, really.
Pretty much, yeah. A critique of context-free collection.
The Renaissance spurred collection, but the shift towards modern, systematic method really began with early, large-scale excavations. We have John Aubrey recording megalithic monuments in southern England in the 17th century, especially the detailed plans of Stonehenge.
Right, Aubrey's work was important.
But the most culturally impactful digs, the ones that captured the imagination of Europe, were Pompeii and Herculaneum.
Oh, absolutely. The discoveries there fundamentally changed public perception. The Spanish military engineer Roque Joaquin de Alcubierre began major excavations starting in 1738 in Herculaneum and 1748 in Pompeii.
What was it about those sites?
The sudden revelation of entire preserved Roman towns, complete with intact everyday objects, stunning frescoes, and the poignant shapes of human figures preserved in the ash from the AD 79 eruption of Vesuvius. It just had a massive cultural ripple effect across Europe. It lent historical weight to the artifacts being collected. It wasn't just stuff anymore.
It was a snapshot of life.
Precisely.
But the true scientific revolution had to borrow its most critical concept from outside the field, didn't it? The idea of stratification.
Yes, the stratigraphic revolution was absolutely fundamental. Archaeologists took the idea of overlapping layers, or strata, corresponding to successive chronologically distinct periods of time directly from the work of pioneering geologists and paleontologists like William Smith, James Hutton, and Charles Lyell.
So geology provided the key.
Pretty much. This principle, that the lower layers are generally older than the upper layers, gave archaeologists their first reliable tool for relative dating and constructing site chronology with confidence. It's the bedrock, literally, of excavation.
This brings us to the figures who created the modern rigorous discipline. Let's start with Augustus Pitt Rivers in the 1880s.
Pitt Rivers, often regarded as the progenitor of scientific archaeology, largely because of his painstaking methodical approach to fieldwork on his estate in Cranbourne Chase.
What did he do differently?
He introduced truly systematic excavation, arranging artifacts by their typology and then chronologically. But his single most important methodological innovation was his unwavering insistence that all artifacts, not just the beautiful, rare, or unique items, be collected and cataloged.
That focus on the mundane shifts the entire goal of excavation. Was that commitment to the complete record revolutionary simply because of the sheer volume of data it created?
It was revolutionary because it forced archaeologists to look beyond the treasure hunting motive. By insisting on the collection of common items like pottery sherds, animal bones, or broken tools, Pitt Rivers shifted the focus from collecting masterpieces to reconstructing daily life, diet, and technological evolution over time.
Yeah.
He understood that the collective record of the mundane tells a far richer story than the isolated brilliance of a single gold object. It's about the whole picture.
Then we have William Flinders Petrie, often called the father of archaeology, whose work transformed Egyptology.
Petrie internalized and expanded on this meticulous philosophy. He famously stated that the true line of research lies in the noting and comparison of the smallest details.
The smallest detail.
Yeah. His most critical practical contribution was developing a system of dating seriation based entirely on changes in pottery styles and ceramic findings. Since pottery is ubiquitous, yet changes subtly over time, this provided a robust, relative chronological framework for an entire civilization, one that didn't depend on written records or royal lists. This revolutionized the study of Egypt.
So dating based on pottery styles.
Clever.
Incredibly effective.
And finally, Sir Mortimer Wheeler, who brought military precision to the dig site in the early 20th century.
Wheeler cemented the discipline methodology. He developed the systematic grid system of excavation that many sites still utilize globally today, particularly in areas like Britain and South Asia.
The grid system, like
Yeah.
drawing squares on the ground? Essentially, yes. This grid, using fixed vertical and horizontal lines across a site, allows for precise control of spatial location. It ensures that the integrity of the stratigraphic and contextual record is maintained, even as the site is being destroyed through the process of excavation. It standardized the practice of archaeological recovery, made it systematic.
So we've covered the methods, but why do we continue to invest so much time and resources in this destructive process? What is the core mission driving archaeology today?
Well, the fundamental goal is about the comprehensive understanding of past societies and the massive narrative of human development. We are trying to understand culture history, rigorously reconstruct past lifeways, everything from diet to social organization and document, and most importantly, explain changes in human societies through immense spans of time.
And the single biggest justification, as you noted earlier, is prehistory. This period accounts for well over 99% of the human past.
That is the ultimate importance of the discipline, that 99%. Prehistory spans from the Paleolithic era, the evolution of hominins into modern Homo sapiens, right up until the advent of literacy in societies globally.
So before writing.
Exactly. For that vast stretch of human existence for which there are no written records whatsoever, archaeology is the absolute only scientific way we can understand critical human developments.
And those developments are the bedrock of civilization. The ability to harness fire, the development of sophisticated stone tool technologies, the discovery of metallurgy.
The earliest conceptualizations of religion and the foundation of agriculture and settled society, all of that.
Without archaeology, all that would be a complete black box.
Utterly unknown. Little to nothing would be known about the material culture, the technological advances, or the social structures of those first 3 million years of human existence. It's the only direct window we have into the minds and hands of our earliest ancestors.
But archaeology is also essential for filling the vast, silent gaps in history, even for highly literate civilizations like ancient Greece, Rome, or Mesopotamia.
Absolutely. This is where archaeology acts as a vital counterbalance to the inherent biases in surviving written records.
How so?
Even in historic literate cultures, literacy itself was often restricted to the elite classes, the clergy, the aristocracy, or the court bureaucracy. These records, by their nature, reflect the interests, assumptions, and worldview of the top 1%, often neglecting the daily lives, material realities, and cultural practices of the general populace, the 99%.
So written history often tells a political or administrative story, while the dirt tells the story of the household economy. Or something like that.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. The material culture produced by people more representative of the general population, the debris of daily life, was, ironically, far more likely to be preserved than their perishable writings.
Right. Pots last longer than papyrus sometimes.
Much longer. Therefore, the archaeological record, despite having its own issues related to preservation and sampling, often provides a far fairer, more comprehensive, and less politically motivated representation of how society as a whole lived and functioned.
Okay, let's move to the theoretical frameworks, because the way archaeologists interpret the material record isn't static. It has undergone massive philosophical shifts.
Oh, absolutely. The theoretical debates are arguably what make the discipline intellectually vibrant. In the early 20th century, we primarily operated under cultural historical archaeology.
What did that focus on?
It focused largely on descriptive patterns and used historical particularism to explain why cultures changed, emphasizing things like diffusion and migration. This pot style came from there.
Descriptive. Got it. Then came the seismic shift in the 1960s, the new archaeology, which we call processual archaeology, driven by figures like Louis Binford.
Processualism was a formal rebellion, a big shakeup. It advocated for turning archaeology into a rigorously scientific and anthropological endeavor.
More science, less history.
Kind of. They explicitly aimed to move beyond simply describing culture history to formulating universal behavioral laws to explain how and why changes occurred. This approach heavily utilized systems theory, treating past societies as complex systems influenced by environmental and demographic pressures.
Okay.
And neo-evolutionary thought, which often led to ideas like ecological determinism, suggesting that the environment was the primary driver of cultural change. Very function-focused.
So they were trying to be objective, aiming for universal generalizations, almost like physics.
That was the ambition, yes.
Yeah.
They focused on hypothesis testing and quantifiable data to make archaeology more objective and less prone to the subjective interpretations of the past. But this emphasis on scientific positivism inevitably spawned a counter-revolution.
Right. There's always a reaction.
Yeah.
Which brought us post-processual archaeology in the 1980s, led by Ian Hodder.
Post-processualism questioned the fundamental premise of scientific objectivity. They argued that the material record is not just a reflection of adaptive ecological systems, it's also symbolic, meaningful, and culturally conditioned.
So objects mean things beyond just function.
Exactly. They insisted on reflexivity, that the archaeologists must acknowledge their own biases and social positioning when interpreting the past. They drew heavily on critical social theories like phenomenology, Marxism, and particularly feminist archaeology.
Feminist archaeology, how did that fit in?
Well, it sought to uncover the previously invisible role of women in the past by re-examining evidence that had been historically interpreted through a patriarchal lens, questioning assumptions about gender roles based on artifacts.
This sounds far more focused on individual decisions and the symbolic meaning objects held, rather than simply environmental adaptation.
Exactly. They stressed the role of individual agency, the idea that individuals and groups could intentionally manipulate material culture to assert power, identity, or meaning, rather than being passively shaped by the environment. It brought meaning and people's intentions back into the picture.
Which means the current state of archaeological theory is messy, or a fascinating hybrid.
Maybe both. It is a dynamic state of intellectual tension. We rarely see pure processualism or pure post-processualism today. We often see hybrid theories, such as historical processualism.
What's that?
It attempts to incorporate the methodological rigor of hypothesis testing and systems theory from the processualists while retaining the post-processual emphasis on context, history, and self-critical reflexivity.
Best of both worlds, maybe.
That's the goal. Modern theory is now borrowing from an incredibly diverse range of sources, including queer theory, post-colonial thought, and even post-humanism. It's constantly evolving.
Let's pivot to methodology. Archaeology today looks fundamentally different than it did during Wheeler's era, thanks entirely to technological advancements. The field investigation now typically follows 4 distinct, technologically integrated phases, often starting long before the first shovel breaks ground.
That is phase 1, remote sensing. This is a non-destructive preparatory phase. The goal is to use advanced instruments, often from aerial or orbital platforms, to map a site or region and gather as much subsurface information as possible before moving on to the costly and destructive work of digging.
Saving time and money and focusing the effort.
Exactly. Minimize the destruction.
I find the distinction between passive and active instruments really helpful here.
Yeah, it's a useful way to think about it. Passive instruments like standard satellite photography or thermal imaging just detect natural energy reflected or emitted from the scene.
Like taking the picture.
Basically. Active instruments, however, emit their own energy signal, like a radar pulse or a laser beam, and then record what is reflected back.
And the undisputed king of active remote sensing in archaeology today seems to be LiDAR?
Oh, LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, is truly revolutionary, particularly for dense, jungle-covered areas like, say, Central America.
How does it work?
It uses rapid laser pulses to measure distance. by firing millions of pulses per minute, and critically, by using software to filter out the vegetation data, the leaves and branches lidar can essentially strip away dense canopy and determine the underlying topography.
So you can see the ground surface under the trees.
Precisely, allowing researchers to map complex, low-relief structures like ancient field systems, causeways, or even entire cities that were previously invisible from the ground, or even traditional aerial photography. It's revealed incredible stuff.
And drones have massively accelerated the pace and accuracy of survey work globally.
Unmanned aerial vehicles or drones, yeah, they are now indispensable. They can replace months or even years of slow, dangerous, traditional ground mapping. They carry high-resolution sensors and GPS systems,
So you get really precise models.
allowing researchers to quickly produce detailed, highly accurate three-dimensional models of sites, like mapping the extensive pre-Inca ruins in Peru, or creating detailed photogrammetry models of above-ground ruins like Aphrodisias in Greece. The speed and quality of data acquisition are just unparalleled.
Once remote sensing identifies areas of interest, we move into Phase 2. Field surveys systematically locating previously unknown sites or features within a known area.
Aerial survey remains incredibly valuable here, but often through very subtle visual cues. From a bird's eye view, faint patterns emerge that are entirely invisible from the ground.
Like what kind of patterns?
For example, the phenomenon of differential plant growth can indicate buried structures. Vegetation often grows slower and yellows faster over hard stone walls or paved surfaces because of reduced soil depth,
Makes sense.
but grows much faster and lusher over organic deposits like middens or former ditches because of increased soil moisture and nutrients. This effect is why photographs of ripening grain are particularly revealing. The contrast in color happens rapidly at maturation. You get these crop marks.
Fascinating. And then we get to the truly intriguing part. Looking beneath the surface without digging, using geophysical survey.
Geophysics, yeah. This lets us see below the ground by measuring contrasts in the soil that indicate human disturbance. We primarily use two complementary techniques. First, magnetometers. They detect minute magnetic deviations. Human activity often increases the soil's magnetic signature, think hearths, kilns, or burnt structures, which retain residual magnetism from heat, or filled-in ditches or middens, which contain high concentrations of magnetically rich organic matter.
Okay, so fire pits and ditches show up.
Right. And how does that differ from electrical resistivity?
Good question. Electrical resistivity measures the soil's resistance to a small electrical current passed through the ground.
Why do that?
This is primarily used to locate features with high-density contrast. Stone or brick features like walls, foundations, or roads tend to have high resistivity, meaning they resist the electrical current.
Okay, stone blocks the current.
Exactly. Conversely, wet, organically rich deposits or loose backfilled soil have much lower resistivity. They conduct better. By using both magnetometry and resistivity, archaeologists can identify a full range of buried features, from fire pits to massive stone architecture, and get a pretty good idea of what's down there before digging.
Now we arrive at phase 3, excavation. This is the iconic but also the most ethically complicated phase because it's destructive.
Right. The moment you dig, it's gone.
It is the most expensive, most dangerous, and most ethically sensitive phase because once you remove the archaeology, that specific context is gone forever. This is why very few sites are excavated in their entirety. Sampling strategies are crucial, dictated by factors like funding, available time, and regulatory requirements like those of the National Historic Preservation Act in the U.S.
So if it's destructive, the recording of location and context must be flawless. How do you ensure that precision?
It must be meticulous. Absolutely meticulous. We record the precise location of every object and feature, what we call its provenance or provenience, in 3 dimensions, usually relative to the site grid.
Location, location, location.
And equally important is the association, which is the relationship of that object with nearby features or other artifacts. If we find a specific type of pottery next to a specific type of coin and a specific type of foundation, knowing that association is the only way we can reconstruct the moment in time when those objects were used together, context is everything.
Could you use a simple analogy to walk us through the jargon of recording a simple feature, like a prehistoric trash pit?
Sure, a trash pit is a good example. If you dug a trash pit in the ancient world, the act of digging creates a hole in the natural soil, which we call the cut.
The cut, okay.
That cut is an event in time, and we give it a specific number, say feature 101. Then everything that people threw into that hole, the trash, the bones, the pottery shards, is the fill.
Right, what fills the hole.
The fill is also given its own consecutive number, say, context 102. The cut is defined by the boundary of the hole, and the fill is defined by the material inside it. Both must be recorded via scaled plans, elevations, photographs, and detailed record sheets to create the permanent, non-material record of the now destroyed archaeology.
So you create a paper version of what you destroyed.
Essentially, yes, a very detailed paper and digital version.
That intensive fieldwork leads directly to Phase 4, post-excavation analysis. This is often the least celebrated, but certainly the most time-consuming part of the job.
Oh, definitely. It's where the real intellectual heavy lifting occurs. It is not uncommon for the final reports for complex, major excavations to take 5 to 10 years. Sometimes longer, to be fully processed, analyzed, and published. The process begins with the cleaning, cataloging, and classification of all artifacts. We use typology, comparing the material to published collections to define assemblages and build local chronologies, sorting and comparing.
But the truly deep insights often come from archaeological science, right? Using lab techniques.
Yep, they absolutely do. Advanced scientific techniques provide essential, otherwise unknowable information about the physical properties and the environment of the past. We rely on zooarchaeology.
Animal bones?
To analyze animal bones, to reconstruct diet and butchery practices, paleoethnobotany and palynology.
Plants and pollen?
To study plant remains and pollen, providing data on ancient environments and agriculture, and increasingly stable isotope analysis applied to human and animal remains to determine diet, migration patterns,
Where people came from.
and the chemical composition of materials for dating and sourcing. These methods take our understanding far beyond what simple observation in the field could ever achieve. It's a huge part of modern archaeology.
Archaeology is clearly a massive field, encompassing a staggering diversity of subdisciplines.
That's right. The field specializes across various axes, method, like lithic analysis, focusing specifically on stone tools.
Just stone tools.
Or geography, Near Eastern Mesoamerican, chronology, medieval, historical, or theme, maritime, battlefield. Even regional studies like Egyptology or classical archaeology require specialized training that goes well beyond general archaeology. You can't know everything.
Let's look at two specific subfields that help us interpret the record by looking at the present: ethnoarchaeology and experimental archaeology.
Good ones. Ethnoarchaeology is the ethnographic study of living people. By observing how contemporary human groups create, use, and ultimately discard material culture, how they leave their own archaeological record, we develop better, more reliable inferential frameworks for interpreting the ancient past.
Like watching how people nap stone today to understand old tools.
Exactly. Or observing how a modern foraging community discards tool fragments around a hearth can inform how we interpret similar scatters from the Paleolithic era. While initial research focused largely on hunter-gatherer societies, it now covers a wide range of human behavior, including studies of modern trash disposal, believe it or not. The Gerbology Project was famous for that.
And experimental archaeology is about actively reproducing the past, testing hypotheses through action.
Precisely. It is the application of the scientific experimental method to intentionally recreate and study the archaeological record. The goal is to improve our inferential frameworks by understanding the mechanics of past activities.
Like building a Roman fort or something.
That's one kind. Classic examples also include experiments comparing the efficiency of a stone axe versus a modern steel axe, or, critically, studying how factors like trampling or erosion affect the vertical dispersal of artifacts at a reconstructed campsite. This tells us what can happen to material culture over time, helps us understand site formation processes.
Moving into the truly futuristic elements, we have archaeometry and digital archaeology, which are bringing physics, chemistry, and IT into the fold.
Archaeometry aims to systematize archaeological measurement by applying high-level analytical techniques from physics, chemistry, and engineering. This is vital for source analysis, defining the precise chemical composition of artifacts like obsidian or pottery to determine their original geological source.
Finding out where the clay came from.
Exactly, allowing us to map ancient trade routes. It also includes the heavy use of geographic information systems, or GIS, which allows us to layer spatial data, and techniques like space syntax for analyzing the organization and movement patterns within ancient architecture. Very powerful analytical tools.
And digital archaeology is leveraging computer power to resurrect the past visually.
Yes. Digital archaeology applies information technology and advanced data management tools. This ranges from using computer graphics and rendering software to create virtual 3D models of entire sites, like a reconstructed Assyrian palace or a model of ancient Rome at its peak.
letting you walk through ancient Rome.
Virtually, yes. To combining photogrammetry and digital topographical models with, say, astronomical calculations to check if features like a temple's pillar alignment corresponds precisely to celestial events like a solstice, it's making the past accessible and navigable in ways never before possible.
And the application of AI has moved beyond mere visualization to accelerating discovery.
Oh, definitely. AI is transforming the front end of research. Artificial intelligence models trained on existing data have been used incredibly effectively to identify new archaeological remains in extremely remote or difficult to access areas, such as the vast, desolate, empty quarter of the Arabian Peninsula.
Finding things humans might miss?
Or things that would take humans ages to find. In one stunning example from Peru, AI technology rapidly identified faint patterns and anomalies in aerial imagery, facilitating the discovery of 303 previously unknown geoglyphs in Nazca.
Wow, 303 new ones.
Just like that. This capacity for massive-scale pattern recognition saves years of human effort. It's a game changer for a survey.
Finally, we must discuss cultural resources management, CRM, because this is where the vast majority of professional archaeology actually happens, right? Certainly in the U.S.,
CRM, or Cultural Heritage Management, yes. It accounts for the overwhelming bulk of archaeological research in the U.S. and much of Western Europe. It is not driven by academic curiosity. It is mandated by law. For example, the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 in the U.S. specifically to protect sites threatened by commercial or government development.
like building new highways, dams, or urban expansion.
Exactly. If federal funding or permits are involved, the impact on cultural resources has to be assessed and mitigated.
So it's rescue archaeology, driven by regulatory compliance. But this system generates significant and persistent conflicts, particularly regarding scholarship.
It does. A major issue is that CRM is primarily conducted by private cultural resource management firms that bid for projects. The agency responsible for the construction, often under legislative mandate to minimize costs, tends to select the proposal that asks for the least funding. The lowest bid often wins.
Which puts pressure on the archaeologists.
Intense time pressure, forcing archaeologists to complete incredibly complex work rapidly. The core criticism is the scholarly trade-off. This system, while preserving the material itself through excavation, often compromises the quality of the resulting scholarship because robust, multi-year analysis simply cannot be completed under the low-bid timeline.
And where does that data end up? Is it accessible?
Well, that's the other crucial takeaway. Much of the data and analysis generated by COM firms ends up in internal company reports, sometimes called gray literature. While these reports satisfy the legal requirement for documentation, they are often not peer-reviewed or widely published in academic journals.
So the information gets siloed.
Frequently, yes. Meaning the wealth of new data gathered during development mitigation is often unavailable to the broader scholarly community for decades, inhibiting our collective understanding of regional history. It's a real problem.
Moving to the modern ethical and cultural challenges facing the field, the public image of archaeology is frequently distorted by popular culture.
Oh, massively. The public perception is overwhelmingly driven by the romantic, adventurous occupation fiction, like the Tomb Raider or Raiders of the Lost Ark franchises.
Whip-cracking, fedora-wearing.
Right. This narrative ignores the painstaking, meticulous scientific work, the data analysis, and the intense ethical complexities inherent in the destruction of non-renewable resources. When these unrealistic, sensationalized subjects are taken seriously in nonfiction, we enter the realm of pseudoarchaeology.
And pseudoarchaeology, as defined by the discipline, is any activity that falsely claims archaeological legitimacy but violates established scientific practice. Is that fair?
Precisely. The difference lies in the method. Scientific archaeology forms hypotheses and tests them against the evidence. Pseudoarchaeology starts with a predetermined, often sensational conclusion, like Erich von Daniken's ancient astronaut theory.
Aliens built the pyramids, that kind of thing.
That kind of thing. And then selectively interprets limited evidence to confirm that belief, often rejecting established evidence-based theories outright. It's confirmation bias masquerading as research. Dangerous stuff sometimes.
To counter this, archaeologists are proactively embracing public archaeology, getting the real story out there.
Yes, public archaeology is a crucial effort dedicated to outreach and education. The goal is twofold: to halt the destruction of sites through looting and to foster genuine public appreciation for archaeological heritage.
How do they do that?
This includes community projects, accessible webcasts, popular TV shows like the UK's Time Team, which was hugely successful. The discipline recognizes that this effort provides significant public benefits, including helping to counteract historical and scientific racism by demonstrating deep, shared human histories and providing time depth to combat modern short-termism, showing people why the past matters.
One of the most destructive and persistent problems, which affects all sites regardless of location or era, is looting and illicit trade.
A huge problem. Looting is an ancient issue. Pharaoh's tombs were targeted millennia ago, but today it is fueled by a global, commercial, and academic demand for artifacts, particularly during periods of geopolitical instability. When looters remove artifacts, they destroy the archaeological context.
That vital information about location and association.
Exactly. This contextual destruction permanently denies future generations and descendant peoples essential information about their heritage, making the object little more than a piece of art without a story. It rips the page out of the history book.
The use of advanced metal detectors by hobbyists presents a more nuanced challenge in some countries, not always straightforward looting.
It does. It's complex. While unregulated metal detecting can lead to accidental looting, positive efforts are being made. The Portable Antiquity Scheme, or PAS, in the UK is a major successful example.
What does the PA do?
It encourages detectorists to voluntarily report and record their findings through an official mechanism, working with finds liaison officers. This approach transforms what might otherwise be illicit removal into cooperation that maintains a crucial scientific record, even if the object is removed from its original context. It's about collaboration, not just condemnation.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the most profound ethical conflict today revolves around descended peoples and repatriation, particularly in North America and other colonial contexts.
Yes, this is incredibly important and sensitive. There is a deep, fundamental tension between the need for scientific study of ancient human remains and artifacts and the need to remain respectful towards sacred sites and the cultural heritage of descendant communities, especially indigenous groups.
And historically, archaeologists weren't always respectful.
No. Historically, archaeologists often removed remains and artifacts from burial grounds without permission, sometimes storing them for decades in museum basements without study or reburial, which understandably created profound ill will and justified anger, a legacy of mistrust.
That tension forced a legislative compromise in the U.S. The Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NOGPRA, in 1990.
NOGPRA was a watershed moment, a huge shift. It limits research institutions' right to possess human remains and funerary objects, requiring them to inventory their collections and, crucially, to consult with tribal authorities to facilitate repatriation and reburial.
Consultation is key.
It forced archaeologists to fundamentally re-examine what constitutes a site and to integrate the views of indigenous peoples, who often view disturbing the past as having consequences for the present community. It's about shared authority now.
A subfield that exemplifies this move toward a model of restorative justice is African diaspora archaeology.
This is a critical area, specifically studying those forcibly transported by the slave trade and their descendants. A landmark excavation was the 18th century African burial ground in New York City, discovered during construction.
What happened there?
The director of research there, Michael Blakey, instituted protocols that absolutely prioritized collaboration with the African descendant community in New York. He viewed descendants not just genealogically, but as a community with a shared, ongoing historical experience stemming from enslavement.
So community involvement from the start.
Yes, this approach emphasizes shared stewardship and community involvement throughout the entire research process, setting a standard for ethical practice. It's about doing archaeology with people, not on them.
But the reality of repatriation sometimes means the permanent end of scientific opportunity. That must be difficult.
That is the ultimate trade-off, and it highlights the ethical difficulty. Consider the case in 2005 when Algonquin nations in Quebec successfully reinterred ancestral human remains and burial goods, some dating back 6,000 years, from the Canadian Museum of Civilization's collection.
A success for the Algonquin nations.
Absolutely. A moment of profound cultural restoration and collaborative success. However, the act of reburial means that no further scientific study, no new dating methods, no chemical analysis is possible on those remains. They are back in the earth.
So the potential knowledge is lost.
Yes. This starkly highlights the conflict between the scientific quest for knowledge and the sanctity of cultural and ancestral respect. There's often no easy answer.
Finally, let's address the global existential challenge that affects every site. Climate change.
Climate drivers are now a primary threat to heritage worldwide. It's accelerating loss at an alarming rate. Rising sea levels directly threaten vast stretches of coastal and maritime archaeological deposits. Think submerged prehistoric landscapes, coastal
Keep
forms.
washing away.
Exactly. Increased drought conditions lead to soil shrinkage and chemical changes that destroy organic remains, while intensified rainfall can cause catastrophic erosion of ancient structures and deposits. And human responses to climate change, like building new seawalls or moving infrastructure, also inevitably impact sites.
But there's a strange, unique silver lining in the melting glaciers. A bit morbid, maybe.
Yes, the paradoxical effect of warming. Melting glaciers and ice patches, particularly in places like Norway or the Alps, have fostered the entire new field of glacial archaeology. As the ice recedes, it reveals long-buried artifacts, leather shoes, wooden tools, clothing, and even perfectly preserved human and animal bodies like Ötzi the Iceman
Incredible preservation.
that were frozen in time, providing incredible high-resolution snapshots of the past. So, climate change is both actively destroying sites and simultaneously revealing new ones.
A double-edged sword.
Very much so. Furthermore, archaeologists' knowledge about how past societies adapted or failed to adapt to ecological shifts is increasingly relevant to helping modern society manage and adapt to a changing climate, and even using sites sometimes to support ecosystems and biodiversity. Hashtag outro.
We've covered a massive amount of territory today, traversing millions of years, from King Nabonidus' attempted chronological dating through the methodical rigor of the scientific founders.
Pitt Rivers, Patry, Wheeler.
Right up to the use of LiDAR technology and AI, finding new geoglyphs in the Nazca Desert.
Yeah.
Archaeology is a quest to document and understand the full, sweeping narrative of the human story. It's quite something.
Indeed. And as we've seen, the discipline exists in a fundamental, almost philosophical tension. It is driven by the desire for comprehensive knowledge about the entire span of human existence, but that knowledge can often only be gained through the destructive act of excavation itself.
The paradox at its heart.
Or by navigating deep ethical and political conflicts with the very descendant communities whose heritage we seek to understand. That tension, that balancing act, is really the defining characteristic of modern archaeological practice.
It makes you truly consider the permanence of knowledge versus the sanctity of the past. So here's a provocative thought for you, the listener, to carry forward. Given that the material record is sometimes the only true, unfiltered representation of non-elite life, the 99%, as you put it, what is the ultimate ethical trade-off? The trade-off between the desire for scientific inquiry into our shared past, understanding how we, as a species, develop technologically and socially, and the need to honor and preserve that history untouched, as seen in the permanent loss of data in the recent repatriations. When does the search for objective knowledge yield to the sanctity of cultural memory?